Yeah, I just wanted to make a totally non-controversial video about United States aid to Israel, military aid to Israel, and obviously making facetious about it not being controversial. There's extremely passionate feelings on every possible perspective in this issue, but I did want to mention it because there's been this sort of false dichotomy that's been presented between funding offensive weapons, you know, bulldozers that raise entire neighborhoods and giant bombs that kill civilians and children, offensive weapons and defensive weapons like the Iron Dome, for example, or other systems that ostensibly protect Israeli civilians and provide security. So, as Israel's foreign policy and its government become almost politically toxic, not almost indisputably politically toxic among large segments of the U.S. population. Israel, of course, has to make tactical decisions about how to maintain the support that they have. And I think it serves them very much to draw this line between offensive weapons and defensive weapons and say, hey, I get some people feel that offensive weapons are too much at this point, but defensive weapons should still be funded. The problem with that is there are multiple issues with funding defensive weapons, and I'll just talk about a few of them. And it's very much in the interest of people who want these weapons to be funded to kind of ignore these issues. So the first is, by providing billions of dollars of funding for defensive weapons, that allows the Israeli government to spend more money on offensive weapons because they don't have to purchase the defensive ones. So they can actually allocate their budget to buy more weapons. It does not stop the creation or the flow of offensive weapons. It merely means that some portion of the military spending that Israel would have to do is taken care of now, and they can spend money on other things. And in a related way, it also avoids Israel having to make some tough decisions internally about spending more on military versus healthcare or infrastructure or things like that. So, it defers some internally difficult, politically unpopular budget making, and it makes it a lot easier for Israel to prosecute these wars of aggression without the citizens having to pay the cost for it, which is usually not very popular. So that's one. The second is, when it's like if you're driving through a neighborhood with a bulletproof car, you feel no fear, right? And it's a similar thing when Israel has the Iron Dome and other, extremely almost, I wouldn't say invulnerable, but very, very powerful defensive systems. Almost inevitably, that means they feel more empowered, more confident to take aggressive action. Because if they bomb Lebanon or Iran or Gaza, they know if there's a counterattack, it'll be batted aside by the Iron Dome. Defensive weapons provide countries with the confidence to be belligerent. That is, you can see that across the world, across multiple conflicts. That is just a fact and a reality. So that's extremely important and widely understood element of this argument. A third issue is whether it's offensive weapons or defensive weapons. When a country provides military assistance to another nation, they're implicitly providing support. They're linking themselves to that country. So when Israel commits genocide in Gaza, or commits actions in Lebanon that I think the vast majority of people in the international community were horrified by. The U.S. is deeply linked to those actions. It's becoming harder and harder to make a case for why America should be sending any funding at all to Israel, for sure. And the list of problems with distinguishing between defensive and offensive weapons goes on and on. These are just a few very, very powerful arguments. And I also want to say, these are not just arguments from people outside Israel. These are arguments that have been made for years from people inside Israel saying, maybe it's time we got past the United States sending us military aid. For one, this means that we often avoid having tough conversations about where to put our budget. It creates a moral hazard. This is a robust debate within Israel as well. So a lot of people in Israel say we don't need these weapons. And if those folks had been listened to, maybe we wouldn't be in quite the situation that Israel's in right now, where its support is plummeting amongst the vast majority of groups in the U.S., especially young people. Anyway, this subject of offensive versus defensive weapons sounds common sense and simple on the surface, but it is very, very far from that.